And now, in conclusion tonight, Mr. Smith from New Jersey, who once again, as a senior member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, has great experience and is unquestionably, like many of us, a strong supporter of Israel. Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much. I thank my good friend from Utah. I thank him for his service to our country and for, again, bringing us all together this evening. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to call on the President of the United States to give Israel the robust and vigorous support it deserves. Since the latest round of unprovoked rocket barrages were launched on July 6th by Hamas, Israeli citizens have lived under a relentless rocket attack, mortar fire, even attack from Hamas drone aircraft, and a foiled sea raid. Israel itself has lived under a media attack, a calculated campaign to isolate Israel for defending itself. Major articles in international newspapers around the world take a grossly anti-Israeli slant. Make no mistake about it, Mr. Speaker, a major purpose of Hamas's rocket attacks is to provoke counterattacks, thereby to use the inevitable civilian deaths to set up an international media campaign against Israel. Hamas is guilty of sacrificing Palestinian lives and is guilty of using women and children as human shields in a brutally cynical attempt to manipulate world public opinion and isolate Israel. Mr. Speaker, the facts on the ground of Hamas attacks were clear from the start and follow long-established patterns. It's time our government sent a much more powerful and unambiguous message that the U.S. fully supports Israel's right to defend itself. The administration should emphasize that Israel's actions in its own defense are legal, that they are right, and that the U.S. stands with Israel without any ifs, ands, or buts, or so longs, or any other qualifiers. As of yesterday, since the start of Israel's Operation Protective Edge, 2,500 rockets have been fired at Israel from Gaza. 1,875 of these have landed in Israel. 495 have been shot down by Iron Dome. Also, as of yesterday, the IDF has uncovered in Gaza 32 tunnels with more than 60 access shafts, some of which were in mosques and houses. Anyone who has read today's feature in the New York Times, tunnels lead right to the heart of Israeli fear. Understand what these tunnels mean. The tunnels are about 50 feet underground, mostly undetectable, like this one to my left, and underground equipment cannot even discover their whereabouts. The story quotes Eliel Brandeis, who lives in Kibbutz Sufa, and he quotes and says, "It's a very pastoral environment. I live in the quiet of the green grass, the trees. It's not pleasant, though, that you sit one day on a patio drinking coffee with your wife and a bunch of tourists will rise from the ground." That's exactly what happened a mile from his kibbutz at dawn on July 17th. Many Israelis more concerned about the tunnels than the rockets. Perhaps this gives us some insight into the dimension of the Hamas terror. I note, Mr. Speaker, that despite these rocket attacks by Hamas and tunnels, Israel continues to permit the transfer into Gaza of humanitarian supplies and goods. Israel's humanity, while under terrorist file, its continued effort to do everything it can to separate terrorist militants from Palestinian civilians, only underscores the evil nature of Hamas. Mr. Speaker, Hamas was designated a foreign terrorist organization in 1997. It has adopted a charter, the famous Covenant of the Islamic Resistance. That charter remains its ideological program. Only yesterday, Khalid Mishal, the leader of Hamas, spoke on the Charlie Rose Show in response to a question, do you want to coexist with the state of Israel? He said no. He said no. Hamas doesn't want peace, nor reconciliation or coexistence. It wants to utterly destroy the state of Israel. I have further comments I will be saying later on this evening about the charter. Please read the charter. It couldn't be clearer that it wants to destroy, that is to say, Hamas wants to destroy Israel. I thank my good friend Vio. Article 28 charges so-called Zionism with massive conspiracy which aims at undermining societies, destroying values, corrupting consciences, deteriorating character, and annihilating Islam. Article 32 charges that the plan of the so-called Zionists is embodied in one of the greatest libels in all of human history, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. All of this, Mr. Speaker, recalls Natan Sharansky's 3D test of anti-Semitism, which he called demonization, double standards, and delegitimization. Sharansky twice testified at hearings that I chaired on combating anti-Semitism, and proposed what he called the simple test to help us distinguish legitimate criticism of Israel from anti-Semitism. As he put it, the 3 Ds are, again, demonization, when Israel's actions are blown out of all sensible proportion, when comparisons are made between Israelis and Nazis. This is anti-Semitism, not legitimate criticism of Israel. Second, the double standard, when criticism of Israel is applied selectively, when Israel is singled out by the United Nations for human rights abuses, while the behavior of known and real and major abusers, such as China, Iran, Cuba, and Syria, is ignored. This is anti-Semitism. And the third D, delegitimization. As he puts it, when Israel's fundamental right to exist among all peoples in the world, this too is anti-Semitism. And this too is exactly what Hamas is engaged in. From its origins to the present day, the Hamas movement has been poisoned by anti-Semitism. And the murderous nature of this evil has not diminished, it has gotten worse. Jews today continue to die because of it. 5 IDF soldiers were killed yesterday. 48 have died since July 8th. And of course, we are deeply saddened by these deaths, as well as all who have died in the conflict. And we must not forget that it is anti-Semitic hatred that is driving this conflict and causing all of these deaths. And so today, Mr. Speaker, I call on President Obama to give Israel our government's full support and to make unmistakably clear our government's position that Israel, in response to Hamas's unprovoked attacks, is fully in the right to defend itself, including to search out and destroy Hamas terror tunnels and those who launch rockets at Israel. Again, I thank my good friend, Mr. Franks, for his leadership, and again for his strong and eloquent statement earlier on during the special order on Hamas. I yield back.